Hello, I'm returning with some more information about photosynthesis. I believe this is the slide that we were on when I had to stop. So we were talking about the chloroplast, which is an organelle in the cells of plants. And the chloroplast is important because it absorbs sunlight and it helps the plant convert the sunlight and the water and the carbon dioxide into energy that's usable for us. So let's look at the different parts of a chloroplast. This part is called the stroma, that's sort of kind of outside of the thylakoid membrane. Number 2, that's the thylakoid membrane that we have right here, the black part. That's the outer part of the thylakoid. Then number 3, that is called a granum, and it is a group of thylakoids. And I think on the Amoeba Sisters, they were referred to these as green pancakes. I think that's what they called them, green pancakes. Then number 4 is the outer membrane of the chloroplast. And finally, number 5, let's see, I'll move myself over here. Number 5 is the inner membrane. So go ahead and write these alongside of this picture. On the fill-in notes, we forgot to put blanks there, but just go ahead and write them down outside of the chloroplast. Okay, moving on. Here's a plant. And this is a leaf of a plant, and they have these little tiny openings in the plants that are called stromata, and they are the things that open and allow the water and carbon dioxide to get in. Because the leaves are kind of waxy, so if you've ever kind of messed around with plant leaves, you can see they have like a kind of waxy outside. That is called the cuticle, and normally water and carbon dioxide cannot pass through the cuticle. So they have to go when these little tiny openings are open that allow the gases to enter and exit. And then at the bottom, the water, it travels up these, they're kind of like blood vessels, but they're called roots, but they're like a blood vessel for an animal. Water travels up through these roots and gets up into the stem of the plant by a process called capillary action. And so I'm trying to think of a good example. If you ever take a straw or a coffee stirrer and you put it down in a cup and the water kind of goes up into the straw a little bit, sometimes it can even be above the water level in the cup. The water goes up into the straw. That is called capillary action. And because water has surface tension and it sticks to itself with the polar molecules, and we talked about that last semester, as it sticks to itself, it kind of climbs up the inside of the vessels called the xylem vessels. Those are the roots. So the water climbs up through those roots through capillary action. So as we've mentioned before, photosynthesis has 2 phases, the light-dependent reactions and the light-independent reactions. The light-dependent reactions are called photosystem 2. The light-independent reactions are called photosystem 1. So let's look at those in a little more detail. The chlorophyll is the pigment inside the chloroplast that literally absorbs the light energy from the sun. And it reflects green energy, and that's why we have the green color, because the green wavelength of light is actually reflected by chlorophyll. But chlorophyll actually absorbs the rest of the light energy coming from the sun. Light can come in 2 forms. It can come as a wave or as a particle. So in this case, it's light in its particle form called photons. And the photons are absorbed into the chlorophyll. And the photons have they're electrons. They have a negative charge. So what happens is the electrons become kind of excited when they enter into the chlorophyll. And then when they drop back down from that energy level, that is when energy is created. So the electrons kind of travel through the chlorophyll, which is in the thylakoid membranes. And I will show you with a picture. So we'll move on. Okay. This is called the Z scheme, and this is where the electrons go as they travel through the, I'm going to hide that, as they travel through the Z scheme. So you've got your wavelength of light coming along. It enters into photosystem 2, and then the electron, that's this, 2 of them, go up to this higher energy form in photosystem 2, and then they go through something called the electron transport chain. And I will show you a picture of that here in just a minute. Then they get into the light independent reaction, photosystem 1, and 2 electrons go through that. So if you want to see where the energy goes, you just follow the electrons. So this is photosystem 2, the first kind. So as we go along, I will show you how that works. So your electrons come down from the sun, and then they travel, and sometimes they need to be in pairs. So you need to have another electron. Well, the only way that the plant can get the other electron is by using the water, and this is why water is important for plants. The leaf in the thylakoid membrane actually splits apart the water molecule, and it takes those hydrogens and uses those, and then it releases the oxygen out of the plant, and that's important for us because we breathe it. So moving on. So a little bit of the oxygen is kept for the mitochondria in the plant to make the ATP. That's the usable form of energy that we mentioned before, adenosine triphosphate. And then the rest is expelled out into the atmosphere, and we breathe it. So that's where the oxygen comes from. This is a more detailed picture of the electron transport chain. So you have proteins in the thylakoid, and what happens is the electron works its way through these proteins that are in the stroma, and they go from photosystem 1 into photosystem 2 into photosystem 1. So here we have the light-dependent reaction. The electrons are moving their way through the proteins in the thylakoid and the part of the interior of the thylakoid. Then they enter into the photosystem 1, which is a light-independent reaction. Ooh, that's a mouthful. Let me try that again. You've got photosystem 2, light-dependent reaction, and this is photosystem 1, light-independent reaction. And the electron works its way through the thylakoid interior, through those proteins to get there. There, that was better. Electrons always move from higher energy to lower energy, and you have to ask yourself, where does that energy go? That energy is being used in the plant to help continue with the process of photosynthesis. What is ATP? ATP is a chemical that plant and animal cells can use for energy. It's a readily available source of energy. The technical way to pronounce it is adenosine triphosphate. So you have an adenine group, and then you have 3 phosphate groups. And what happens in our cells is we actually break apart the phosphate. One phosphate, we break it apart, and then you end up releasing energy that way when you break that bond. So that is why ATP is so important for energy, so that we can break that bond and release the energy that's in that bond. The lower form is called ADP, and that's adenosine diphosphate. And you can still get energy from that, but it doesn't have the 3 phosphate groups anymore. It only has 2 phosphate groups, like that. So a wrap up. In photosystem 1, the electron has to be excited by light energy, and then the electron is passed to proteins, and they're passed in this chemical form, NADP, and that goes to light-independent reactions. And then you end up with hydrogen ions that are created inside the thylakoid. So what happens to the hydrogen? They are kind of like moved along by an enzyme that's called ATP synthase. And the ATP synthase moves the hydrogens out through a concentration gradient. And what that means is there's a lot of hydrogens here, but there's none here. So the hydrogens want to balance themselves out. It's kind of like if you have a whole lot of people in an elevator. When the doors open, the people want to come out of the elevator. The concentration of people gets lower as they go out of the elevator. So these hydrogens are trying to get out of the elevator because there's a lot of them, and they're trying to get out into the stroma of the chloroplast. And they come out in the form of ADP plus PI, that is adenosine diphosphate plus inorganic phosphate. and also ATP, that's the one with the higher form of energy that we need. Okay, here is a little video that goes through and talks about everything I just said. So let's try it. I'm not sure if the sound will work on this when I'm recording, but we can give it a shot. So I'm going to start it and we'll see. I'm going to turn the sound up. I don't know if that will make a difference.
Consist of arrays of chlorophyll molecules. Chlorophyll, the green pigment of leaves, absorbs light energy. The absorbed energy excites electrons to a higher energy level. Energized electrons from photosystem 1 are passed down an electron transport chain plus forms Meanwhile, energized electrons from photosystem 2 are passed through
Okay. Oh, sorry. Okay, hopefully the sound worked on that. I'm not going to stop recording and check right now because I'm kind of on a roll. So I will put a link to that little illustration, and if you can't see it, then, or if you couldn't hear it, then maybe you can get it that way. So now I'm trying to find the PowerPoint. Aha, there we are. There's the PowerPoint where we were. So in the light-independent reactions, there is a cycle occurring there too called the Calvin cycle. And that actually occurs in the stroma, which is not the thylakoid, but in the area around the thylakoids in the chloroplast. And what you have there going on in the light-independent reactions is this cycle called the Calvin cycle, which is pretty complicated. I'm not going to make you memorize all of this. What's happening is you've got chemicals going in and out of this cycle, ATP turning into ADP, and that releases energy. Same thing over here, NADPH releases energy and just turns into NADP. So you've got that also going in some other chemicals too. So you've got all of these things shuffling around inside the light-independent reaction in the stroma of the chloroplast. What I want to know is, how do they figure all this out? I really don't know the answer to that. So I'm learning this with you. It takes 6 times for the Calvin cycle to go all the way around to create one glucose molecule that we can use for energy, or the plant can use, for energy. And then we can use after we eat the plant. And so here is the light-independent reaction, and this did not work earlier. Let me see if it works now. Nope. Okay, so I will see if I can find a video that will substitute that, and I will link it to the agenda. Sorry. And then here's a picture that kind of puts it all together, all of photosynthesis together. This whole big thing is the chloroplast. It's green because it has chlorophyll, which is a good conductor of electricity and electrons. It's green because it absorbs all of the light coming from the sun except for the green wavelength, which is bounced off and reflected, and that's why it looks green. These are your thylakoid membranes. They absorb light and they give off ATP, which is energy, and NADPH, which is another form of energy. And then also throughout this process, it takes in water, H2O, and gives off oxygen. So that's important. That's why you have to water your plants. That's why they'll wilt and die if you don't have enough water. And then the oxygen is so important because that literally the Earth's oxygen has come from plant life. Like before plant life evolved, there was no free oxygen in the atmosphere. So now we have 21% oxygen, which is good. And then this energy that's been released through photosystem 1 goes over into photosystem 2. I keep getting those backwards because you would think that this one would be named photosystem 1, but it's not. So we got photosystem 2 that goes into the Calvin cycle, which is photosystem 1, the light independent reaction, takes in carbon dioxide and gives off sugar, which we eat up. So that is photosynthesis right there in a nutshell. And that is where we stopped. We didn't go any farther. Oh, yes, we did. I'm sorry. We did fill in this chart. So we filled in this chart with the picture I just showed you. So with the light-dependent reaction, you have carbon dioxide and water, and it gives off ATP, NADPH, sugar, and oxygen. And the light-independent reaction takes in carbon dioxide, energy in the form of NADPH and ATP, and it gives off glucose. So these are the two reactions that occur inside the leaf. And that's where we stopped. So we have not talked about cellular respiration yet. So fill in notes. You can do it online or you can do it on paper if you print it out and you can write it in and take a picture. Either way, but you are going to get credit for filling it in as you listen to the PowerPoint. I hope that I didn't confuse you. It's a lot of big words, a lot of intricate processes. And just shoot me off an email if you don't get it, and I'll be glad to help you out. Okay? Thanks, and have a good weekend. Let me stop this. Let's see.